We have a young girl in our church. We have several young girls in our church. They want to be dancers. Some of them, they want to be musicians, others of them. And we're talking about young girls in the age from 6 to 10 years of age. And I want people to hear this so they can understand that you and I are not lunatics. We're not haters. We're not filled with evil. They need to know that these young girls who, if we don't stand like you and I standing and preach, they can be led or influenced to cut off their breasts once they get into puberty. They can be led to have operations like Justin Bieber. They can think that the best choice for their life is to cut off their breasts and go through this period that's so pervasive in television and everywhere else. And then by the time they reach the age of 20 years old, they look and say, I wish I had never cut off my breast. I wish I had never mutilated my flesh. I wish I'd never cut off my penis. I wish I had never done that. I was just young. And the people in the church or the people in the media said or gave the impression that I had a right to choose any kind of sexual orientation that I wanted to choose, and so I cut off my penis.
So here we have Pastor Manning sitting in front of the Royal Arch of Freemasonry. Scriptures on the right, scriptures on the left, showing Samson in the middle as the keystone, breaking away the chains. In the story, if you remember, the temple fell when the twin columns were broken, just like on 9/11, when the twin towers were destroyed, chaos followed, and we've been at war ever since. Iraq, Afghanistan, the war on terror, the elimination of all of our civil liberties. So certainly chaos has followed us ever since 9/11, 2001. Behind Bradley Manning, is that his name? Or Pastor Manning, whatever his name is, you see the name Apollo, which is consistent with the mystery religions and the sun gods, and the birth of the sun on December 21st. So here he is in front of the Royal Arch, clearly demonstrating that he is a Royal Arch Mason, or a Prince Hall Mason, a Shriner, and talking about Justin Bieber. I correct myself, his real name is James David Manning, not Bradley Manning. I got him confused with that other homosexual dude. Anyway, I'd like to show you some slides to demonstrate the Royal Arch of Freemasonry in politics and its connection to the Vatican. So I'll be running through some slides here and talking to you about these images. Here's a Royal Arch with the all-seeing eye at the top, and in the middle you have the Holy Roman Emperor and the cardinals to his right and left. Here's a typical Freemason Royal Arch. This one, the keystone, is not in place yet. There's angels there. It has Solomon, Israel, Hurim Abif. Right here is the Royal Arch emblem, and here's the pyramid or the triangle inside the circle, and the masonry floor, the checkerboard. There's another motif of the Freemasonry. The Royal, what does that say on top? The Royal Arch with the sun and the moon, which is the same as saying Solomon. When Royal Arch Masons get together, this is how they grab each other. Here's the Royal Arch on the top left. On the bottom is the cross and crown of the Knights Templars, like Obama. Here's the Royal Arch in a Catholic cathedral with the victim on the cross. There's your role model. That's what they want you to do, crucify yourself. Here's the St. Louis Arch as they set the keystone. As you know, it's called St. Louis, named after a saint. Therefore, it is Catholic. This is in Europe. Here's a symbol of a monetary institution, I believe. The twin columns and the Royal Arch. And here's the Pontifex Maximus sitting on his throne, the Holy Roman Emperor, King of the world. Clear as day, the Royal Arch. I believe this monument is in Maryland. And it was a monument to a war. I can't remember the war. But of the 13 colonies, 2 of them were Catholic colonies, and Maryland was one of those colonies. So here's another tie of the Royal Arch to the Vatican. Here's a Royal Arch. Clearly a large gateway. And if you're an American, you probably have one of these. As a slave, all slaves in America need a Social Security card under the Royal Arch. Probably didn't know that was there, did you? Here's a media group, Bridgestone. What is the Bridgestone? Is it not just the Royal Arch, the keystone in the middle? And here's the famous military general, George Washington, who gave us the Revolutionary War, which allowed the Jesuit order to take control of the United States of America through the elimination of the Act of Settlement of 1701, which prevented Catholics from having political power in this country. But thanks to George Washington, that restriction was removed because the laws of Britain were removed. But even in today in the UK, you cannot be a Catholic politician because it's part of their law, the Act of Settlement of 1701. You might want to look it up. Here's a little postcard from Gerald Ford indicating he's a Royal Arch Mason. Independence Hall is loaded with Royal Arches. And here's our Emperor. He's very comfortable under that Royal Arch. Even Michael Jackson had the Royal Arch. The word dangerous there serves as the arch in between 2 pillars. He has the all-seeing eye over here and another Royal Arch. This is on one of his album covers. He also has an album covered with Aleister Crowley on it, just like the Beatles. Or is this it? Is that Aleister Crowley here? I'm not sure. Here's a popular music star sitting in front of the Royal Arch. That looks like the letter M on the bottom, which numerically is the number 13. There's another example, the Royal Arch connected to the all-seeing eye. This is a Masonic apron. And another. Here on this Masonic magazine, the word Masonic serves as the arch. Their Citizens Bank has the Royal Arch if you turn it sideways. Clever, aren't they? The Wurlitzer jukebox uses the Royal Arch. Here's the Royal Arch at the J.P. Morgan building in Irwindale, California. At the keystone you have the head of Medusa. Here's a Royal Arch out in Rancho Santa Margarita at the Water District. This is out in a courtyard. And here it's connected to Titanic. The top of the arch is the cross. This is hanging from the arch, the bell. It says Titanic 1912. So the sinking of the Titanic clearly tied to Freemasonry and the Jesuit order, so they could bring us the Federal Reserve System. Here's Paramount Studios with their Royal Arch. And is that a mountain peak in the background, or is that really a pyramid? Time magazine put the Pope on the cover with the St. Louis Arch, and then next to that is the Goddess, Queen of Heaven, which the Catholic Church worships. And of course Time magazine was founded by Skull and Bonesmen, which are initiated by the Jesuit order. It was J.P. Morgan that owned White Star Shipping, the owner company of the Titanic. And when the Titanic sunk on April 15, 1912, resistance to the creation of the Federal Reserve ended. And that brought in the Federal Reserve System and the IRS. Therefore, taxes are due the same day that the IRS, or the same day that the Titanic went to the bottom of the ocean. Also remember, it was J.P. Morgan that gave us the Federal Reserve Act to bring in the Federal Reserve. So that's why the Titanic is heralded and paraded in states around the country. There's museums, and you have people like this lady that look like a nun talking about how great it was. You see, with the sinking of the Titanic, the secret establishment, the Vatican, was able to take over the world through the greenback. So here we have Dawson, which means son of David, a Christ figure, standing by Rose, the goddess. She's blocking him, basically eclipsing him. This is representing a solar eclipse by the moon, which is done in the Catholic Church every day at Mass when they put the Eucharist in front of the sun on the monstrance. They're doing the same thing. They're blocking out the sun. So on the anniversary, the 100th anniversary of the Titanic sinking, the museums had a big celebration, and they had people get married on the Titanic, and they went on a cruise from Belfast, where the original Titanic departed from, and they took the same tour as the Titanic did when it sank. So it was a big celebration for those that worship the Titanic, and so people put their names in to be married on the Titanic. Would you want to be married on the Titanic? Isn't that a little bizarre? Anyway, I got a little bit away from the Royal Arch and started talking about the Titanic, but full circle here. At the grand staircase, you'll see on the left the Royal Arch. In the movie, by the way, which was the richest, most expensive movie ever made, Dawson told Rose to meet him at the clock, and the clock is at the left at the top of the staircase. On a side note, before the Titanic ever crashed in 1912, or was destroyed on it in 1912, it was already written about in a book called The Wreck of the Titan. I think it was like a dozen years previous to the Titanic's destruction. So the name of the boat was called the Titan, and it also sunk in the Arctic like the Titanic did. It's not a coincidence. This is like a ritual that, just like 9/11, it was pre-planned. And the name Titan or Titanic is also symbolic of the moon. I think there's at least one or two moons out there called Titan, or yeah, look it up. Titan. It's a moon of one of our planets. So back to the Royal Arch. Here's a hat by a Royal Arch Freemason. Here's the Royal Arch in the Shriner monument with the Egyptian pharaoh as the keystone. And of course, Shriners are connected to many presidents like Ford. J. Edgar Hoover was a Shriner, the first head of the FBI. Here's Truman, John Wayne, Ford, J. Edgar Hoover, all wearing their Shriners caps. It has ties to Egypt, but it is an Islamic order. That's why Obama is Islamic, and he fits nicely with the Shriner organization. The Prince Hall Masons are black Masons. That's what Obama is. And I believe that's what Manning is. I believe he's a Prince Hall Mason, a Shriner. Douglas MacArthur. There's George H.W. Bush. That's not a Shriner's hat. It looks like a Baphomet hat. There's Truman. So black folk are allowed into the Prince Hall Masonry. There's a Shriner. That's Baphomet. The Templars worship Baphomet. Here's Roosevelt. Looks like he's receiving a Masonic handshake. Okay, so here's a little chart showing at the top of the 33 degrees of Freemasonry. All the top orders are Catholic. Order of the Knights Templar, the Order of Malta, the Order of the Red Cross. You keep coming down and you get to the Royal Arch Masons. Citibank uses the twin columns in the Royal Arch. Royal Arch meaning it's connected to bloodline, royalty, the royal bloodline. That's why it's blood red. Connected to the richest institution on earth, the Vatican.